Hello everyone, welcome back to Spectator Sports, where we cover sports from a spectator's point of view. I'm your host Sebastian Fonseca. This is episode number 121. And before we get into another loaded episode for you guys today, please do us a massive favor. We are on the grind to 200 subscribers by the end of the year, but we're going to need your help. If you can do us a massive favor and drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. It really helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you want to get clips from today's episode, we have that for you here on YouTube as well as on TikTok. And if you want to enjoy Spectator Sports in an audio experience, we got that for you too. I'll link to Spotify as well as the other two platforms here in the description. And let's get into today's episode. After the Chicago Bears dropped yet another one-possession game, this time against the Detroit Lions in front of a national audience on Thanksgiving afternoon, the Bears did something that they never did in franchise history: make a head coaching change mid-season. On Friday, the Chicago Bears announced that they are firing head coach Matt Eberflus after their losing streak got extended to 6 games after the bye week. The final straw that broke the camel's back in terms of Matt Eberflus's head coaching tenure with the Chicago Bears was the final possession. When the Bears were driving into Lions territory, they had a 1st and 10 inside the Lions' 25-yard line. And on first down, they got a completion to Keenan Allen to draw within the 15-yard line. And that's prime position to have even the go-ahead touchdown. They wouldn't even have to settle for 3 to win the game. However, penalties brought the yardage back. Now you're beyond the 35, and Caleb Williams takes a bad sack, and now you're at the Lions' 40-yard line. You got to get going. Too much time gets off the clock. You have almost 20 seconds run off the clock for no odd reason. And Matt Eberflus could have done something. He had a timeout in his back pocket. However, time expires on basically what's a last gasp attempt where Caleb Williams loses track of time, and that's it. Game over. Bears lose again, and this is now the 3rd straight time the Chicago Bears drop a divisional game where they had control, they had a chance to win in either regulation or overtime, and they botch it in the final minutes. And it's one thing to lose to the Packers on a blocked field goal. It's one thing to rally from a deficit against the Minnesota Vikings and even rally against the Detroit Lions. But to walk away and let the time continuously tick off the clock where you have a timeout, I think that's when Bears management finally lost it with Matt Eberflus, where his incompetency was just holding this organization back that we've been seeing for the greater part of 2.5 years. Matt Eberflus has shown the door in a tenure that hasn't been all that great, and his record in one-possession games is awful. After Thanksgiving, his record dropped to 5-18. with several of those losses piling up after the Hail Mary against Washington right after the bye week. Now, on the positive side, you're finally rid of Matt Eberflus, and you can begin your search for your next head coach. Thomas Brown already has the inside track just because he's gotten another promotion in this season alone, where once he was just an offensive assistant, he got elevated to OC. And now from offensive coordinator, he's promoted to interim head coach. Now, we've seen where somebody gets promoted as the interim head coach, like the Jets, where that takes away time from his position group. And we've seen the Jets defense collapse since Jeff Ulbrich has taken over as interim head coach of the New York Jets. But I do think that Thomas Brown will retain play calling duties and continue to nurture Caleb Williams. And that's really all you want to do. You want to continue to develop Caleb Williams and see what he has, see how he gels with the offense, who you can keep and who has to go. Because this is going to be a pivotal offseason for the Chicago Bears. I mean, to stop this vicious cycle, what you're going to have to do is find a great offensive mind that is on the market. Pay him whatever it takes. Make sure that he gels with Caleb Williams and has a plan on how to develop him. I mean, basically, Thomas Brown is auditioning for that already in this last 5 or 6 games of the Bears season, where they do have a chance to improve on what's been a lost season, and maybe if he does so, maybe if he can galvanize this locker room that was clearly lost under Matt Eberflus's tenure, maybe Thomas Brown can find himself as the next head coach of the Chicago Bears in 2025. And probably what was their toughest test all year, this was a prove-it game for the Eagles. Now, previously they had prove-it games against the Bengals on the road, the Washington Commanders at home on a short week. Then they had the LA Rams across the country on Sunday Night Football. Well, another prove-it game came around. The Baltimore Ravens, down I-95. You're facing the reigning MVP. It's a prove-it game. The Baltimore Ravens are known to be an elite football club. They're bullies. They know how to be physical against any one of their opponents. They play in the AFC North with plenty of physical divisional rivals. And Lamar Jackson has only lost to an NFC team once, and that was against the New York Giants in 2022. And right on cue, the Eagles started off slow. They trailed 9-0 midway through the second quarter. Their first quarter woes continued. That's been a common theme throughout this entire season. Yet, we've seen them take this boxer-like mentality. Throw a couple of jabs, they get a couple of body blows, and then eventually they knock you out. That's exactly what happened in this game. Saquon Barkley is the closer. He's the knockout punch for the Philadelphia Eagles, because he had a 25-yard touchdown scamper to basically ice the game in the fourth quarter. And yet again, he goes over the 100-yard mark, and now he's just a yard shy of 1,500 yards. And there's a chance that Saquon Barkley could break the Eagles record 3 games earlier than LaShawn Shady McCoy did in 2013. What Saquon has done, obviously, has changed life in Philadelphia. I mean, he's risen to becoming the best back in the league behind the best offensive line in the league, where they continue to wear you down, wear you out, and eventually just the floodgates open, the dam breaks, and Saquon busts loose for a game-clinching touchdown. And we've seen it now in 3 weeks in a row where they've trailed. They trailed to the Commanders. They trailed against the Rams, and yet again trailed against the Baltimore Ravens. But they figure out a way, somehow, some way, and eventually, like I said, those dams break, the floodgates open, and you find Saquon Barkley in the end zone for a game-clinching touchdown. Main takeaways from this game is that this defense is truly legit. And we know that the biggest pickup this offseason is Saquon Barkley. But let's also give some credit to the Philadelphia Eagles organization in finding a way to get Vic Fangio away from the Miami Dolphins and bringing him in as the defensive coordinator for the Eagles in 2025. With him being brought in, Howie Roseman picking up Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith last year in the first round of the draft, plus factor in Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and Jalix Hunt, all of which had some impact in this game against the Ravens under the tutelage of Vic Fangio, has changed life in Philadelphia. This defense rounded the best NFL offense to just 12 points for basically 59 minutes. A garbage time touchdown helped out their stats, their yardage, etc. But for much of this game, it was a 24-12 ball game. And we talked about Jalen Carter, but also Jordan Davis, Josh Sweat, Nolan Smith, and Jalix Hunt have all been contributors now on a defensive line that's now without Brandon Graham. They've controlled the line. They've been part of a team that helped bottle up Derrick Henry, who had 36 yards in the first quarter, which is quite a bit. But after that first quarter, he was held to just 46 for the remaining 3 quarters. And that starts up with the defensive line, but also that star linebacking duo. I mean, Zach Bond is playing like an all-pro. It's just there in the tape. He's playing sideline to sideline. He is a guy that Vic Fangio took a flyer on. He, in New Orleans, was just simply a special teamer and a little bit of an edge rushing guy, used in special packages. But under Vic Fangio, we've seen him blossom to an all-pro caliber linebacker. And Nakobe Dean, who has been relatively quiet in his first 2 years in the league with the Philadelphia Eagles, he's been a very consistent starter for the Eagles this year. And then in the secondary, you're coming into this game without Darius Slay, and then Reed Blankenship gets knocked out with a concussion halfway through the game. So you have two new starters in Isaiah Rodgers and then Tristan McCullum coming in at the safety spot. Well, it's still short up because you have Quinion Mitchell, who is continuing to lock up receivers. He did a great job on Zay Flowers, only allowed 2 catches for 4 yards on the entire afternoon. Cooper DeJean is now the slot cornerback ace who did a good job. I mean, he had a one-on-one tackling clinic on Derrick Henry where he upended King Henry and threw him to the ground. That's textbook tackling right there. And in the safety spot, we're seeing consistent play out of CJ Gardner-Johnson throughout this entire season. After a shaky start, he's been good since the bye week, and that's really how this whole Eagles team has been since the bye week. This Eagles team is holding opponents to 15.3 points a game, with their latest performance against the league's #1 offense and the reigning MVP, like I said. And yes, in the box score, you'll see that the Ravens got good yardage and they were really good with moving the ball within the 20s. But when it came down to the red zone, in drives that mattered, they were just 1 for 4. And even if you factor in the garbage time touchdown in the last final seconds of the game, it was still 2 for 5 on the day. And we'll talk about Justin Tucker's struggles a little bit later, but still, we have to give credit to this Eagles defense that has changed the entire identity of this team than last year, around the time when they faced the San Francisco 49ers and they looked old, they looked slow. We saw Deebo Samuel score a hat-trick of touchdowns, just outrunning the entire Philly defense and making a mockery out of Sean Desai's defensive schemes. Well, instead of getting Vic Fangio disciples, they went to the source himself, Vic Fangio. They got him in as the DC. So far, his adjustments, his coaching, and how he's been able to nurture this defense has been amazing to see. It's been monumental to the Eagles' 8-game winning streak so far. Both sides of the ball continue to excel, and this team is looking like a real juggernaut on a day that they didn't even have Devontae Smith, who missed this game due to a hamstring injury. He'll be back sometime soon, and that's just another piece that we'll see being added into this Eagles team. So when this team is going to be ready, and I think they'll be healthy come postseason time, but they're zeroing in on the NFC East. They'll probably wrap that up in a couple of weeks, and then they're really focused on the 1 seed because the way Detroit looked against the Chicago Bears was a little bit shaky, and their injuries are certainly catching up to them. The Detroit Lions have 17 players on IR, and that includes several key pieces on the defensive side. So we all know that the NFL is about the war of attrition. And while Detroit has looked great, and I still think Detroit should be favorites coming out of the NFC, but don't be so fast to dismiss the Philadelphia Eagles as being a team that can be right up there amongst the NFC's elite. And I'm really thinking that the championship game would be the Lions-Eagles. We talked about Justin Tucker's struggles earlier in the year, and it's continued to get worse. On a day against the Philadelphia Eagles where he not only missed an extra point, but 2 field goals, that left 7 points on the board, and that was by far his worst performance in an individual game. 3 missed kicks is something we've never seen from Justin Tucker, a guy who's obviously known as the greatest kicker of all time. He's Mr. Consistent. He was the most accurate kicker coming into this season, but this year he has fallen off the rails, and he's missed 10 kicks to start off this season, including several within the 40 to 49 range. And we know that 50-yard kicks are no gimmies, but that was something that's kind of set Justin Tucker apart. I mean, just 3 years ago, he set the NFL record for the longest field goal ever. Yes, it hit the crossbar, but it was still up and good. He made a 66-yard kick to beat the Detroit Lions 3 years ago. And in this game in particular, when the Eagles were down 9-0, you're getting ready to try and block an extra point, which is rare. But Justin Tucker doinks it off the left upright, and that kind of gives Philly some life. I mean, they didn't score directly off the next drive, but I think 10-0 and 9-0 is kind of a big difference. Yes, there's still 2 possession games, but I think the fact that you mentally can prepare for a double-digit deficit versus a single-digit deficit is something to keep a note of. That continued to kind of build in Tucker's head, where we've seen throughout this year he's missed kicks wide left, and he did so on his next kick. And then he overcorrected, where he tried to hit it and it was wide right this time. And that's where we get into the mental games. And he's really second guessing how he strikes the ball. It looks like the snap, hold are consistent. Those seem like pretty simple operation. The ball's laces out, and he's just not striking the ball the way he likes to. And we know that kickers, when it becomes a mental game, it's really hard to get yourself out of it. And the Ravens have a big decision coming up. The postseason is right around the corner. If Justin Tucker doesn't fix this in the next couple of games, it is really time to consider cutting the greatest kicker of all time to bring in somebody that can at least be consistent, because at the rate it's going, Justin Tucker has already cost the Ravens several games this year, and it could even be the end of their season if he's lining up to kick for them in the postseason. Josh Allen and the Bills are back from the bye week, and we got to see them beat down the 49ers, who came into Western New York desperate because they lost their recent game against the Green Bay Packers and then the week before against the Seattle Seahawks. And coming in at 5-6, their only real path to getting into the playoffs this year is really through the NFC West. And a desperate 49ers team came into Western New York, and Mother Nature had a monkey wrench to throw into this game. And she brought a blizzard that came in on Saturday, and this field was blanketed with snow. Now, of course, Bills Mafia was there to clean up the mess, get the field ready for a Sunday night game. And pretty much right after kickoff, the snow continued on as another blizzard rolled through Buffalo, and we got to see the Bills basically make fools out of the 49ers, who play in California. They're not accustomed to snow, and really have their way with them because they are used to playing in these wintry conditions at this point. They practice, they played in countless snow games at this point, so playing in snow is nothing new for the Buffalo Bills. And Josh Allen, I mean, he is the MVP frontrunner. In his last appearance against the Kansas City Chiefs, he had that 4th-and-2 touchdown run to ice the game. And while Saquon Barkley has caught up with Josh Allen in recent weeks, we still have to give it to Josh Allen at this point. This is a quarterback award, and I think it would take Saquon Barkley probably going over 2,000 yards and even breaking Eric Dickerson's record to win the MVP at this point, because right now Josh Allen, while the stats aren't particularly gaudy, he's really doing it all with some wow plays. He had basically a hook and ladder to Amari Cooper that he was credited for a receiving touchdown. And on the evening, he had a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown, and a receiving touchdown. That's the first quarterback in NFL history to do that in a single game. And I owe Bills Mafia an apology. I, like several other media members, picked the Buffalo Bills to have a down year because it made sense initially. I mean, Stephon Diggs, your number one receiver, he's gone. He's playing for Houston. There's some beef between him and Josh Allen. The defense is old. They're lost countless pieces. And coming into the year, Matt Milano goes down with an injury in training camp. He just got activated in December. And we weren't sure who these pass catchers would be for Josh Allen. So, and in recent years, the pressure of standing up to the Kansas City Chiefs, even momentarily, Cincinnati Bengals kind of usurping them as the number one team to push the Chiefs and even beating the Chiefs in a postseason matchup. I think the Bills are back to being the top contender in the AFC and being one of the biggest threats to the Chiefs come postseason time. I mean, already beating them head-to-head once, obviously that they have to figure out home field advantage because that's the goal now, right? They've locked up their AFC East on December 1st, and that's 5 weeks left in the regular season. That's something we haven't seen in almost 15 years. And the Bills have just been so dominant in this division where they've won their 5th consecutive AFC East title, and since the post-Brady era, it's been all Bills, all Sean McDermott, all Josh Allen in this division, and they've dominated it despite the Jets coming in with Aaron Rodgers, despite Tua and the Miami Dolphins bring in Tyreek Hill. It's still been the Bills show in this division at least. And obviously now their sights are set on the AFC's top seed. They obviously own the head-to-head tiebreaker with the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs still, like I said in weeks previously, that they have a tougher schedule coming up. Next week on Sunday night, they host the LA Chargers, a team that's been up and down, but still has been relatively good. And they still have to play the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that is trying to lock up the AFC North title this year, and they play them on Christmas Day. And who knows, if it comes down to the final day, they do end up playing the Denver Broncos, who could be fighting for AFC playoff positioning at that point. So it's definitely a lot left in the final 5 weeks in the AFC playoff picture, but with the way Josh Allen and these Bills are, they're an all-round team, and I would not be surprised if they somehow were to slip in and steal the number 1 seed away from the Kansas City Chiefs. Getting to the 49ers side of things, this season is clearly not meant to be. The 49ers stand at 5-7, and now you've lost Christian McCaffrey for what seems to be a season-ending PCL injury. Now, he was looking good in certain moments in this game in the snow, but after jumping over a defender and kind of getting nicked up on the landing, he went down after a toss play, and I thought immediately, did he blow out his Achilles? But I mean, while the Achilles is intact, he's been going through bilateral Achilles tendonitis this year that's caused him to miss a few games to start off this year. It's still concerning that his knee is now bugging him, where he could probably miss the rest of the season. He's slated to miss 6 weeks, and unless the 49ers make a miraculous run into the playoffs, it's likely that we won't see Christian McCaffrey for the rest of the season. And it's just a big blow where you came into this year missing Dre Greenlaw, and along the way you lose Nick Bosa, you lose Javon Hargrave, Diamador Lenore on the defensive side, and then offensively, Brandon Ayuk goes down with a knee injury, ends his season. Problem with the contract situation, it was a huge offseason distraction with George Kittle has been in and out of the lineup. Deebo Samuel has been in and out of the lineup. And even Brock Purdy missed the game last week. So it's been really difficult year for the 49ers. Super Bowl hangover is very much a thing. We know that this window is probably closed on the 49ers, and now it's just time for the front office to face reality. And what that means is you're going to have to let go of some of these veteran pieces that were part of this core that took you to countless NFC championship games, and those deep runs, like I've said, have matriculated to wear and tear on this team. It is emotionally investing, it is physically taxing on the body when you're playing not just 17 games, but probably 19, 20 games, and if you make it to the Super Bowl, which we've seen this Niners team do. And it's a shame that they couldn't get it done against the Chiefs, who have arguably the best quarterback of all time. But if anyone was to do it, it was probably last year's 49ers. They were super stacked, and they had a good defense that were in control of that game, but they just couldn't make the plays to finish off the deal. And in this offseason, probably have to think about letting go of Deebo Samuel. I mean, he has not lived up to expectations since being a first-team All-Pro in 2021. And probably have to look at George Kittle and see, is he worth bringing back? I think he is, but definitely not at whatever his cap number is come next season. Probably needs to get that restructured. Defensively, they have to get younger. I mean, Fred Warner has a limited shelf life. He is getting banged up. He's injured as well. Diamador Lenore has been in and out of the lineups. Like I said, Hafunga, while he's been good, he's missed now significant time in back-to-back seasons. And it's going to take probably trading a piece as well to get additional draft capital, because the only way to get through this older roster is just to get younger, and the best way to do that is the NFL draft next year. And it's going to be some hard decisions, and maybe next year's edition of the 49ers aren't going to be an elite team, and they still do have to figure out the Brock Purdy situation. I am not one to give out a $50-60 million deal to Brock Purdy. I know that the woes of this year is not all on Brock Purdy, but we've seen quarterbacks elevate their play, carry a team through certain patches, rough patches of a season. And we just haven't seen that in Brock Purdy. And it's really hard to evaluate that when a guy might be asking for max money when his play maybe looks good statistically, but the results aren't there in the win and loss column. I would like to bring back Brock Purdy. I think he's absolutely worth an extension, but not at max money. And if you can't come to a decision immediately, franchise tag him. Play that game a little bit, get it done sooner rather than later, because that number is going to drive up, and who knows, maybe they find somebody else to take over this offense. And for this Niners team, as presently constructed, their window has absolutely closed. And it's going to take a few steps in maybe not one offseason, maybe two, for them to get back amongst the NFC's elite. The LA Chargers pick off Kirk Cousins 4 times, and to break down each one of them, I looked at the tape, and I really can't make too much sense of about 3 out of those 4 interceptions. On the first interception, you see Kirk Cousins throw it into triple coverage. I don't know what he's trying to do there. It's pretty clear that the receiver is covered up pretty well, and there were definitely options out there for a dump off or just throw it away, but instead Kirk tries to force a ball, he gets intercepted there. The second one was an inexcusable pick 6, where I don't know, he looks in the direction, and I don't know if he underjudges the cornerback's ability to undercut the route, but it was a gifted pick 6 for Talib Still, who took it back all the way. Then you saw his third pick, yet again, in triple coverage, made 0 sense to what the game plan was. It took off 3 points off the board where they had a chance to at least get a field goal on 3rd and goal. And the final one, I think that is the most excusable, quote unquote, that I can think of, where he's just trying to make a play, he's going for broke, and it's intercepted by Derwin James. Derwin James is one of the best safeties in the league, and he makes a great play on the ball. But we haven't seen Kirk Cousins play well in recent weeks. In this 3-game slide for the Atlanta Falcons, he hasn't passed for a touchdown, and he has thrown 6 interceptions in 3 games. And in this 3-game slide, we've seen the Falcons kind of come unraveled. I mean, Younghoe Koo has missed several kicks. I think about the Saints loss where he missed 3, I believe. And in the game against the LA Chargers, he missed a 31-yard kick, I believe, wide right, and he has figured out ways to get over his early career struggles. But if these are coming back, this is another case where a kicker has looked good for a couple of years, but then if that confidence starts to wane on you, that's where you got to come up and make a decision, because if Koo continues to struggle, we'll see him probably on the street sometime soon. But getting back to Kirk Cousins, the interceptions are there. And looking at how the Falcons have lost games this year, they're just 2-6 in games that Kirk Cousins turns over the ball. That's simply not going to get it done. He looks older. He looks slower. There's less zip on the ball. I mean, the arm strength clearly is starting to wane, and that's beyond an Achilles surgery. I understand that you generate maybe some power through that base, but it's also through that arm strength where it's coming in with the torsion, the speed, the shoulder, the rotator cuff area, where that's all part of having zip on the ball. And I'm just not seeing that from Kirk Cousins in this recent slide. I mean, they look great in late September through October. They swept the Buccaneers, and they were basically cakewalking at this point, but a 3-game slide. Now the Buccaneers, who have come all the way back despite missing their top 2 receivers for a significant time, well, Mike Evans is back, and they're tied now. The only thing helping out the Falcons at this point is that they swept the Bucs earlier in the season, so they have the head-to-head tiebreaker, but their schedule doesn't get any easier. They do play the Minnesota Vikings next week, and that's probably their hardest game on their schedule. So we have a lot to learn with the Atlanta Falcons going forward. And if they don't come up with solutions fast, they will be missing out on the postseason entirely. Now, for the Chargers side of things, I thought they responded really well after dropping the Monday Night Hardball to John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens, where we saw them be kind of one step behind against the Ravens. And yes, the J.K. Dobbins injury is something to consider. It's a serious injury. He's on IR. He's going to be missing some time. That's a huge piece of this offense that is now missing in action. But I do think that after riding the ship, getting some good contributions on the defensive side, that this Chargers team is a year away from really being a true contender, but they also are several years ahead in this Jim Harbaugh regime, where Jim took over a team that was a mess. Brandon Staley, Tom Telesco left this franchise an utter mess. He's been able to maximize some good contributions with the defensive side despite cap restrictions. He's made great moves in the draft. I mean, Joe Alt has been a bookends tackle, and he's been great, and he could be an all-pro come this season as a rookie, which is great to say. He's found some way to get something out of Quentin Johnston. He's kind of dropped off the last couple of weeks, but Quentin Johnston has been solid, at least in the entire season. But Ladd McConkey, I think, has been a gem in the second round. He's been that typical slot guy, and he has been having a great month and a half recently with a few 100-yard games, including one against the Atlanta Falcons. And of course, we're getting typical contributions from Justin Herbert, and it's nice to see that the Chargers are responding after a few years of up and down under Brandon Staley and GM Tom Telesco, that they're able to figure things out. And next week is going to be a prove-it game. I mean, the Chiefs, while haven't been at their best, they're going to be playing the Kansas City Chiefs yet again on the road, and I can't remember the last time that this Chargers team has beaten a Patrick Mahomes-led Chiefs team. It's been quite some time, and if they can get some improvement, and even if it's a loss, but it's a close game yet again, I think that's a good measuring stick, because we've seen the Chargers, they've beaten up on the bad teams pretty well, and then they kind of fall 1-2 steps short of beating some of these elite teams. And we've said this, that they're ahead of schedule in terms of the rebuild, but not quite there as a true contender. And I think the adjustments are made, and we'll see next week what they do against the Kansas City Chiefs, because it may not be the final time that they play them this season. After the Boston Celtics handed the Cleveland Cavaliers their first loss on the year, Cleveland had a little bit of a minor slide, losing 2 games to the Atlanta Hawks, who've been one of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference, but they still responded, haven't dropped the game since. And in a game on Sunday against the Boston Celtics, where they were down by 12 points, Donovan Mitchell catches fire in the fourth quarter en route to making 4 out of 4 three-pointers in part of his 20-point fourth quarter night, where they play a free throw game against the Boston Celtics, because Boston, we know, is such an explosive team, especially with their 3-ball. And when you're up 3 or up 4, you just simply cannot allow Boston to get off a quality 3-point look. And what we saw for the last 30 seconds or so was a free throw shooting contest, where you go down, Cleveland goes down, they make free throws, and then they instantly foul Boston. And Boston was basically neutralized to the point where they had to force up a missed free throw attempt, couldn't get it, and Cleveland hangs on for the victory. And it's still a very early race in the Eastern Conference, but it's good to see that Cleveland can handle their own against the Boston Celtics. Now, it is November, so let's see how it happens later when these two teams meet up for 2 pivotal matchups in February, because a lot could change. And Boston is now finally fully healthy, because we're seeing Kristaps Porzingis return to the lineup, and he did play in this game. And remember, in the postseason, though, you're going to have to beat Boston 4 times to advance. So we'll see how this develops later on in the postseason. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Remember to help this channel out, help us grow, reach 200 subscribers by the end of the year. Please do us a massive favor, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Shout out to Joey for editing this podcast, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Take care, everyone.